to multiply this monomial by this trinomial, we're going to have to distribute. So we're going to go one term at a time. Let's go with that first. 5 times 3 will give me 15. And x cubed times x squared will give me, think about it. Yes, I'm hoping that you're thinking x to the 5th. Because when we multiply exponents that have the same base, we add the exponents. All right, let's go to the next one. 5x cubed times negative x. Well, it's a positive times a negative, so I know it's going to be negative. 5 times 1 is 5. And x cubed times x to the 1st is x to the 4th. All right, one more term to go. 5x cubed times negative 2 gives me 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. And then x cubed times, there's no x term on the 2, it's a constant, so I just get x cubed. And that's my answer. All right, let's look at the next one. This one, for the second example here, I've got a binomial times a binomial. So I don't just have one term that I have to distribute, I've got 2 terms that I've got to distribute. And you can use the FOIL process. But what the FOIL process is really helping you do is just make sure that you distribute both of the terms. So let's look at it in terms of distributing. I'm going to start with the x squared term here, and I'm going to distribute it. So I'm going to multiply x squared times x squared, and I get x to the 4th. And then I'm going to do that same x squared times the 9, and I get 9x squared. Now, I've got to distribute the negative 1. So negative 1 times x squared will give me negative 1x squared, or just negative x squared. And negative 1 times 9 will give me minus 9. Now in this problem, we're not done. The problem before this, we were done. But here we're not done. And I want you to take a close look at this polynomial and tell me, well, you can't tell me, but I want you to think about why we're not done. What do we have left to do to simplify this polynomial? Well, the middle 2 terms are like terms. They're both x squared terms, so I can combine them. I've got a positive 9x squared and a negative 1x squared, and when I combine them, I get positive 8x squared. So now I can write my final answer, which will be x to the 4th plus 8x squared minus 9. All right, let's look at the next one. Here I've got a binomial times a trinomial. But I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to start with this x and distribute it to each term in the trinomial, and then go with the 3 and distribute it to each term in the trinomial. So let's do the x first. We've got x times 2x squared. Remember, this is x to the 1st. So that will give us 2x to the 3rd. Then I've got x times negative 5x, and that will give me negative 5x squared. And then I've got x times negative 7, which will give me negative 7x. So far, so good. Now I work with the 3, right? Now I'm going to take the 3 from that binomial and distribute it to the trinomial. So I've got 3 times, right here, 3 times 2x squared. So 3 times 2 will give me 6, and that will be x squared. Then I've got 3 times negative 5x, so that 3 times negative 5 is negative 15, and it's 3 times negative 5x, so I'll have an x on there. And then 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. And just like with the previous problem, I'm not done because I've got some simplifying to do. I have a negative 5x squared and a positive 6x squared. And then I've got a negative 7x and a negative 15x. So I only have one x cubed term, so I'm going to write that one down. That would be, I'll come over here, that would be 2x cubed, right? Now I'm going to combine my like terms, my x squared terms. I've got a negative 5x squared. That needs to be combined with a positive 6x squared, and that will give me positive 1. Now I've got my x terms. I've got a negative 7x and a negative 15x. Combine those, and we get negative 22x. And lastly, our constant term. There's nothing else to combine it with because there's no other constant term, so we just get minus 21. And that's our final answer. All right, so I'm going to actually move this, I think, so that I have a little bit more room for this final one. Move this over here. All right, and for this last one, now we're doing a trinomial times a trinomial. But the procedure is still the same. We're still going to take each of the terms of the first trinomial and distribute it into the second. All right, so let's do it. We've got 3x squared times x squared, which will give us 3x to the fourth. Then we've got 3x squared times negative 4x. That will give us negative 12. And then x squared times x to the first is x to the third. Because remember, we just add the exponents. Then 3x squared times negative 4 will give us a negative 12x squared. All right, now we've got to do the same thing with the x. So we've got x times x squared. That will give us x cubed. And I'm just going to write it underneath my x cubed term that I have already, because that's going to make it easier when I go to combine. If you prefer not to do that and you want to keep it all in a straight line, that's fine too. This is just another option. You don't have to use it, but I'm just going to line them up because then when I'm looking at my terms to combine, it might make it easier. All right, then I've got that same x, right? We're still working with this one, times the 4x, negative 4x. So x to the first times negative 4x to the first will give me negative 4x squared. And then I've got one more. I've got this x to the first times my constant term, which is negative 4. So x to the first times negative 4 is negative 4x. All right, one more term in my trinomial to go. Now I've got to do this negative 1 here. So I've got negative 1 times x squared, which will give me negative x squared. And you'll notice I'm going to line it up the same way. I'm going to put all my x squareds, like kind of stack them. And my like terms, just stacking them to make combining easier. Then I've got negative 1 times negative 4x, which is a positive 4x. And lastly, negative 1 times negative 4 gives me a positive 4. Now when I go to combine my like terms, I've got them all kind of stacked on top of each other. So first, I've got 3x to the fourth. There's nothing to combine it with, so I'm done with that. Next, I'm going to look at my x cubed terms. I've got a negative 12x cubed and a positive 1x cubed, so that's going to give me negative 11. Done with that. Now I go to my x squared terms, and I've got a negative 12x squared, a negative 4x squared, and a negative 1x squared. So add that all together, negative 12 plus negative 4 plus negative 1 gives me negative 17. And that's done. And then my x terms, I've got a negative 4x and a positive 4x. So That it should equal 0, so I don't have to write that. And then I've got my constant term. All right, so that one took longer because we had more to distribute and we had more to combine, but it's still the same process. Just make sure that you distribute every term in the first set of parentheses to every term in the second set.